Good afternoon and welcome to today's webcast, Employer Roadmap, a step-by-step guide to hiring internationally trained professionals. My name is Nancy Mabin and I am part of the professional development team at HRPA. Before we begin the presentation and to provide additional time for individuals to log in, I'd like to alert you to a few of our PD programs. Next week, on Wednesday, March the 8th, HRPA will deliver a one-day seminar entitled Strategies for High-Risk Terminations. High-risk terminations are fraught with difficult legal and practical issues, particularly when they involve a disabled, pregnant, or potentially violent employee. In this session, you will examine the risks involved in these terminations and how you can minimize them. Explore the entire termination process from start to finish, including due diligence and proper documentation. Also on March 8th, over the lunch hour, HRPA will deliver what employers need to know about reprisal complaints under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The Occupational Health and Safety Act has undergone significant amendments in the past 2 years, including adding new provisions to better address workplace harassment and giving new powers to health and safety inspectors. Is your workplace up to date with the most current employer obligations under the law? This session will specifically review the meaning of reprisal under the Act, the types of workplace situations that could give rise to a reprisal complaint, and the intricacies of the complaint process. It will also present recommendations to employers on how to avoid the costly consequences of reprisal complaints, drawing on recent examples from decisions of the Ontario Labour Relations Board. Finally, on Thursday, March the 9th, HRPA will deliver the first of a 3-session online program entitled Basic Concepts in HR Management Certificate. As a small business's biggest cost and source of competitive advantage, your business needs effective human resources management to succeed. HRPA's Basic Concepts in HR Management is a 6-hour online program that outlines what every small business needs to know about effective human resources management: hiring, compensating, developing and managing people, payroll, employment law, performance management, workforce planning, and more. The online sessions are scheduled on Thursdays, March 9, March 16, and March 23rd. For further details on these and other PD programs, please visit our website at www.hrpa.ca/professional development. Now for a few quick housekeeping remarks. If at any time you experience technical difficulties, please send an email to pdwebinars@hrpa.ca or indicate the issue to us via the Q&A panel on your screen. Throughout this webcast, we encourage you to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can in the time that we have. I also encourage you to download today's presentation by selecting the link that can be found in the Resources panel on your screen. And finally, your feedback is very important to us. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey that will be sent. The recertification or CPD code will be provided on the last question of the survey. And now I'm very pleased to welcome today's facilitators, Louis De Palma and Devin Franklin. As the Director of Small to Medium-Sized Businesses, Louis De Palma is responsible for developing and implementing initiatives of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce that are designed to strengthen the business climate of Ontario and support members by providing them with access to resources. Devin Franklin is the project manager of Hire Immigrants, a program at the Global Diversity Exchange, a think and do tank based at Ryerson University's Ted Rogers School of Management. Hire Immigrants is an online platform for employers to find and share good practices on immigrant employment and seeks to increase the awareness about the value of skills and talent immigrants bring to local and global businesses. Previously, Devin worked at Humber River Hospital, developing volunteer programs directed at students and foreign-trained professionals to help launch their careers in the healthcare sector. Devin holds an Honours Bachelor of Arts from the University of Toronto and a Master of Arts in Immigration and Settlement Studies at Ryerson University. Welcome.
Well, thanks very much, Nancy, for the kind introduction. And Devin, welcome to the webinar today. For some of you that have participated in previous webinars, this is the third and last webinar in the series related to Hire Immigrants, the organization here based out of Ryerson University. So, in previous webinars, we've talked about some of the issues related to, the companies are facing when it comes to workforce development. And maybe I'll just tee up the presentation today that Devin is going to get, and then we'll both be involved in answering questions as we go through the process today. So, as many of you folks know that are on the webinar, arguably the single most important issue facing most of the companies in Ontario today is the need for skilled talent, or the lack of talent is a big problem for them. In order to maintain our competitive edge, our companies have to be innovative. We are competing in a global economy, and certainly talent is a key ingredient of innovation. And also without talent, productivity tends to wane, and obviously if we're not productive, that competitive edge obviously vanishes quite quickly. So, as you know, why is this happening? Really, it's a demographic issue. We're just not replenishing ourselves in Ontario and in Canada as we should. We're at about 1.6, 1.7 children that we're having. Just to stay even, we need to be at 2.2, 2.3. So you can really see there's a gap there. So that's why it's extremely important that we take a look at not only those folks in our communities that are underrepresented in the labor market, but also newcomers coming into Ontario and into Canada, in terms of how can we facilitate that transition into the labor market in a way that makes sense for companies and also makes sense for the individuals. So today, Devin is going to take us through a number of tools that are available to you through the Hire Immigrants site, but mainly she's going to focus on the roadmap. The roadmap is a terrific piece of work that's been developed years ago that really sets out a process that companies can undertake to tap into the newcomer market right from the beginning of trying to determine what your needs are at your company, all the way from the hiring process, and even more importantly to the retention process, because I think that's key. As I drive around Ontario and I talk to many companies, it's not just about the hiring, it's about the retention, because if you hire someone and you need to have an inclusive environment in your organizations, because that's the retention piece that becomes extremely important. So having said that, I'd like to turn it over to Devin, who will take you through the slide deck and provide you with all kinds of wonderful bits of information. And again, we'll try and answer as many questions as we can as we go through the presentation. Devin, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Nancy and Louis, for the lovely introduction, and to everyone who's on the webinar today. Thank you for allowing me to share with you a very important resource on the Hire Immigrants platform and the tool. So I'd just like to give a thanks to our sponsor for this webinar, the Ontario government. So this webinar is a part of a larger project that we're working with Hire Immigrants and Magnet on employer engagement for immigrant employment. So today I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Hire Immigrants platform, just to refresh your memories for those of you that have attended previous webinars around the Hire Immigrants platform. I'm going to give a brief overview of our program and what some of our core pillars of activities are, and then really the majority of the webinar is going to be dedicated to delving into the employer roadmap, exploring the different sections and what they can do for your needs. Ideally, we would hope that everyone would start at the beginning of the roadmap and work their way all the way through, but it also allows for you to pinpoint specific areas of interest or areas that you need to develop or work on to explore those further. And then we'll end off with a few of the resources to learn more about the roadmap and about the Hire Immigrants platform more generally. So what does Hire Immigrants do? So we're many things to many employers and entrepreneurs, but a few key elements are Hire Immigrants is an international web-based program. So we have partners not only here in Canada, but also internationally, including Sweden, Germany, France, and the United States, making it a global hub for useful practice, policies, research, debate, and ideas on how to leverage diverse talent and immigration for businesses and the economy. We utilize a network of employers and immigrant-serving organizations to profile good, replicable practices and resources around immigrant employment. And we act as a single point of entry to increase employer awareness of the value of immigrant skills and immigration to business needs. So how do we do this? So we organize our activities under 3 main pillars. So we provide useful employer tips, tools, and resources. We connect employers and industry partners to other organizations to help meet employment needs. And we convene. So we bring different stakeholders together based on common interests or challenges. So one example of this is the Syrian Refugee Roundtable agenda. And so we've brought together over 60 stakeholders, including employers, refugee-serving organizations, and research institutes to try to address this challenge. So the importance of this work has never been more evident. About 1/3 of Canada's population, which works out to about 14.4 million people, will be a visible minority by 2031. The country's foreign-born population is also expected to rise to as much as 28%, about 4 times faster than the rest of the population. As Louis suggested, this is of immediate need for employers and HR professionals to learn how to embrace this diversity in their businesses. So Hire Immigrants is here to help in making sure that that empowerment happens among employers and HR professionals. And we start by making a strong business case to invest in immigrant and newcomer talent. We provide resources, including the roadmap, to help manage the different facets of recruiting and retaining newcomers. And we provide a way for employers to connect to that talent through the magnet technology. Again, for today's session, we're going to focus explicitly on the employer roadmap. Before we get to the roadmap, though, I'd like to briefly review the core business case for investing in newcomer talent. Depending on where everyone on the webinar is in the recruitment process, I think it's important, just as a refresher, to go over why this matters and why we need to invest in better understanding how we leverage diverse talent and skilled immigrants in our businesses. So this graph demonstrates the current and immediate future of the Canadian labor market as of 2015. The biggest demographic wave in the country's history hurtles into retirement. 2015 marked the first year in Canada's history with a population made up of more people over the age of 65 than under 15. Economists are calling this the retirement boom. The boomer generation, now aged 50 to 69, makes up 27% of the population. The number of people over 65, which is the typical retirement age, is 16% of the population, and this is growing rapidly. This leaves a huge labor force gap, not to mention the skills gap. With the retirement of senior staff, there will be a gap in the experience and expertise they bring to the labor force. Skilled immigrants provide a solution to the labor and skills needs and will minimize the gap in experience from boomer retirement to new graduates acquiring the skills and experience necessary. There have been numerous studies completed that demonstrate diversity. That includes diverse ideas, diverse perspectives, foster innovation. To remain competitive, Canadian employers must learn to leverage the immigrant talent. That skilled immigrants boost innovation by bringing new perspectives to your business. They bring diverse experiences and approaches to improve problem solving and can bring fresh ideas to your team. Foreign-trained professionals and skilled immigrants bring much added value to your workforce as well. Many immigrants speak other languages and have lived and worked outside of North America. Their knowledge of international business practices can help you do business and build relationships around the world. Their awareness of different politics and cultures of a region are essential competitive advantages to accessing global markets, landing a contract, or merely developing international relationships. Stikeman Elliott, a law firm Hire Immigrants profiled, said, having diversity in our workforce helps us increase our cultural fluency and our ability to connect with clients from different cultures, whether in Canada or internationally. And finally, employers want to know, how does hiring immigrants help their bottom line? And beyond the benefits I just discussed, there have been several studies that demonstrate a clear correlation between diverse companies and higher revenue. Intel performed a study of 170 companies in the US in the tech sector and found that if 2 companies are identical in every way except for racial, ethnic diversity, and female representation in leadership, the more diverse company will, in all likelihood, have higher revenues, be more profitable, and have a higher market value. So once we've made that business case, how do we engage employers to act? How do we help employers overcome some of the challenges they face when it comes to hiring skilled immigrants? Well, Hire Immigrants provides free and accessible resources. So we provide success stories that describe employer best practices. We have a webinar series that allows for a peer-to-peer exchange. So we bring industry experts in who can speak to the successes they've had and allow for the audience to engage in a Q&A. And we provide employer tools, so resources for employers and HR professionals. So for today's session, we're going to explore one resource, which is the Employer Roadmap. And I think it's a great starting point. It's a step-by-step reference in which you're encouraged to start at the beginning as a way to review all of your current practices, but you can also skip to an area of particular interest. And you can also embed this feature right on your site. So if you have an internal site for your HR professionals, you are encouraged to put this on your site so your staff can navigate through the sections at their own leisure. So the Employer Roadmap is divided into 6 sections, and for today's session, I'm going to go through each section, going over some of the key elements and then leaving room for your own exploration to go through it on your own. So it makes most sense. Let's start at the introduction. So this section provides a brief overview of the roadmap itself and its usefulness. It should be seen as a starting point. This is unfortunately not a solve-all solution, but a great way to start. It's intended to enhance your current practices and provides a step-by-step guide with considerations. It's important to remember that this roadmap was designed with HR professionals. So it was all of the content, the direction, points of consideration was developed through consultations with HR professionals. And while it was developed initially in 2009, I think it speaks to how much further we have to go here in Ontario in terms of embracing skilled immigrant talent, and because all of the content is still very relevant. The next section is Recruit. It's very exhaustive, and so we'll explore the beginning subsections, and I'll leave some of the latter sections for your own independent exploration. Importantly, this subject and section is really about asking the right questions of your hiring practices and processes. As Albert Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would use the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. The questions in this section we ask you to consider include: how widely am I marketing employment opportunities? Am I reaching any and all potential candidates? Am I doing anything that discourages or excludes skilled immigrants from applying for my job openings? How can I expand my pool of potential candidates? And what changes must I make to my recruitment practices to attract skilled immigrants more effectively? The goal of this section is to help you do just that, to recruit more effectively. And it walks you through some of the considerations that must be taken into account. Recruitment objectives, so actually understanding and knowing what your hiring needs are. Making sure that your job descriptions are inclusive and have barrier-free language. And establishing networks within the community to make sure that you're reaching the pool of candidates available to you. To know your hiring needs, the demand, and the characteristics of your available labor force, the supply, we suggest completing a workforce analysis. And there's a virtual workshop that you can complete right in the roadmap. The workforce analysis will get you to work through important questions, including: in what areas are you under-resourced? To fill these gaps, do you intend to create a new position, fill a vacancy, or add to an existing position? What are the skills, competencies, and qualifications required to perform this job successfully? Can you staff the position internally? And what are the long-term objectives of this position? If the workforce analysis demonstrates that an external hire is necessary, the next step is to weigh the hiring opportunity against your organizational objectives. Again, you're asked to consider: are you looking to deepen your understanding and engagement with your diverse, multicultural local community? If so, what cultures are represented in your community? Does your organization wish to sell its products and services in foreign markets? If so, which markets? So again, this gets back to representing the communities within you work in, as well as representing the communities if you're looking to access global markets. Which leads to the most notable section in this recruitment section. And this is where you're encouraged to know your community and understand our current demographic shift. And there are online resources to help you navigate this. But why is this important? And again, I go back to accessing the global markets. As Zabine Hirge from RBC said, to win in your market, you need to hire the market. And again, this relates back to the business case. Accessing global markets as well as local ethnic markets here in the GTHA as well as in other communities across Canada and even in Ontario means you need to reflect the market. There are a number of online tools to help you better understand your current community as well as the communities abroad. We ask you to consider if your recruitment strategy is inclusive. This section offers some key considerations. Again, asking you, how do you write your job descriptions? Establishing a recruitment philosophy specifically focused on skills, regardless of where those skills were developed. And making a specific commitment to hiring skilled immigrants by allocating a number of positions to career bridge interns or bridging programs for skilled immigrants. We provide a number of employer examples that speak to organizations that change their recruiting goals towards greater inclusion of skilled immigrants, and they've realized benefits from it. And I encourage you to go again on our website, onto our Twitter page. We have a video series right now that's launching this week around hiring skilled immigrants, and you can hear from employers like TD, KPMG, RBC around how they've benefited from a more diverse and inclusive workforce. In latter subsections in the recruit section, you can explore how to effectively define the role, how to design a job advertisement, and how to market the job so it's inclusive and reaching those diverse candidates. So the next section is assess and select. So the goal is to ensure that you're not screening out the right candidate in the assessment stage. Numerous research studies have shown that applicants are being screened out due to unconscious bias based simply on a name. It's important to review processes to ensure that bias is addressed and that you're able to overcome it. Some of the key considerations are what proportion of skilled immigrants apply for employment opportunities and how many are actually granted interviews. To what extent are hiring managers involved in reviewing resumes to select interview candidates? And are managers trained in diversity? And is there any aversion to validating international credentials? If it's seen as an extra step and onerous, perhaps that's leading you to have a certain bias when you're looking at a resume with foreign credentials on it. Accessing a diverse pool of candidates can be helped through connecting with local employment agencies. And we've seen that in numerous of our employer success stories, that those employers that have had success have reached out to local employment agencies, connected with those organizations that are in immigrant serving and immigrant facing positions to be able to create a pipeline to fill some of those recruitment needs. These are just a few examples of ones that are located here in the GTHA. Importantly, in reviewing applications, we encourage you to find substance in every resume. Assessing international experience and language proficiency and ensuring candidates are not screened out simply as a result of cultural differences is the emphasis of this section. We provide a number of different resources, including a communication skills video to help identify methods for assessing a candidate's level of English proficiency, and service providers that can assist in assessing credentials and managing language and cultural differences. In reviewing, we discuss key differences between competency and credibility. Competency referring to training and accredited education from institutions in Canada or abroad, and credibility referring to the demonstration of skills in real-world situations. Of specific emphasis is the assessment of international credentials and overcoming barriers to regulated professions. This subsection provides resources, services, and best practices of other employers such as CIBC. The other subsections of Assess and Select explore how to prepare for the interview, which provides a number of tips and tools for developing cross-cultural interviews, making the hiring decision, and providing an equitable offer, also are explored. Next is the onboard section. Importantly, this section emphasizes that integration is a two-way street. Both the organization and the new hire must adapt and accommodate for full integration to be realized. This section provides tips and tools to help this process. Onboarding is not just simply welcoming the new hire to the organization and sending them off to work. It's about orienting, training, and accommodating to realize full integration. This section provides printable resources to ensure your orientation to the workplace reviews aspects of the job that you may not have considered from a newcomer perspective. It includes tips for providing cross-cultural training, not just for the new hire, but for existing staff as well, and provides best practices, including a peer mentoring program. I'm sorry, you're dealing with the outcome of a cold that's still lingering. This section reviews the importance of setting expectations. So again, it's not to assume that the new hire knows what is expected of him or her. Setting expectations sets up the new hire to be successful. Many organizations have formal accommodation policies to address the needs of their diverse workforce. It's important to review these with the new hire and assure they're aware of their rights. And this also should be seen as an opportunity as an organization to demonstrate your commitment to equity. We provide you with many resources, such as a religious accommodation checklist. Even if you have a formal policy, I encourage you to review this section closely. As an inclusive environment, it not only benefits skilled immigrants, but can work to strengthen the organization as a whole. This type of transformation requires the support of senior leaders within the organization and those who can ensure its implementation and longevity. This section provides a number of key considerations and questions to ask not only of yourself, but of upper management. Remembering that an inclusive environment starts at the top with senior executives, and so to ensure that you yourself can make that business case to senior executives and get that buy-in from the top, that will kind of translate down to the lower level workers. Cross-cultural training is not just for new hires, but for all staff. We provide great resources and other webinars to implement these. The next section is around talent management. This section is dedicated to ensuring that your new hires want to stay and grow with the organization. Retention is a huge issue among different organizations, and this section really explores how you show that investment from an employer perspective. It stems from communicating this growth to new hires right from the beginning when they're onboarded and demonstrating that there are opportunities to grow and develop within the organization. We have seen time and again from our success stories that organizations that invest in their new hires see greater job satisfaction, increased productivity, and ultimately retention of loyal employees. From these success stories, this section provides a number of resources for talent management, including a tip sheet for managing performance, recommendations for the benefit of understanding the career goals and learning needs of new hires, and practical advice for promoting employees and retaining them. The last section is conditions for success. So it's important to not become complacent. Oftentimes we have formal policies in our organization and we think we're doing a great job, and in many cases you are, and so this isn't meant to seem as though you're not doing enough, but it's important to always be reviewing and evaluating and asking yourself, where are we now and where do we want to be? Again, in this section we pose a number of questions to consider, such as what types of cross-cultural events, training, or other supports were offered to employees last year? How many skilled immigrants were promoted? To what levels within the organization? How many left the organization? Where did they go and why? It's important to demonstrate commitment from leadership. It's important to showcase diversity champions within your organization. Communicate your success both internally and externally. You want to demonstrate to the community that you're successfully integrating skilled immigrants into your workforce and experience success as an organization. And Hire Immigrants is here to profile these successes, so please share them if you have them. This is the areas in which you can share them. So we encourage you to go on our website, again, to explore the other areas of the roadmap itself, and to also reach out to us via hireimmigrants@ryerson.ca to share those stories. It can be anything from a single employee that you've hired and demonstrated that skill of integrating to a mass recruitment that allowed you to demonstrate that commitment. Every story is worth hearing and sharing. Lastly, for those of you who are interested in attending one of our free webinars, we have an upcoming webinar on overcoming hiring bias. Registration is free and open to all that are interested. We have facilitators, the VP of HR from HGS Canada, and a managing director from an HR consulting firm in the UK, one of our international partners, speaking about how do you address and work towards overcoming hiring bias in the recruitment stage. Thank you for listening. I hope we have a fruitful Q&A. I am going to stop talking and save my voice for some of the questions and turn it over to Louis.
Well, Devin, thank you very much for a fairly thorough presentation about the two tools that are available on the Hire Immigrants site and also the roadmap and how it can be used for companies to access into this talent pool. Maybe a question that I might have as we're waiting for some of the questions from the folks on the webinar. Can I actually source talent through the Hire Immigrants site?
You can. So recently, as recently as September, we partnered with Magnet, which is also based out of Ryerson University. And it's a technology platform that really closes the loop for hire immigrants. So again, we make the business case, we provide these excellent resources, and then we have employers and HR professionals come back to us and say, great, I get it, I'm going to hire, but where do I find this talent? And so Magnet really closes the loop, and so you can access it right from our website. It allows you to build a profile, use the same language for your job description that job seekers are going to use when they're looking for a job. So it makes a really seamless match rather than you post in one kind of rhetoric and a job seeker using different language, and sometimes those matches aren't as apparent. So this technology allows for quick and easy matching.
I see here there's a question that says, how do we register for the upcoming webinar? Can you just maybe give us the coordinates again for that?
Absolutely. So if you go to the Hire Immigrants website, it's right on the homepage under Employer Resources. So it'll say upcoming webinar. I can also share with Nancy the link to that to make it available as well.
Okay, I see here, maybe I'll take this question. It says, what is the reach/coverage of Magnet among employers in Canada? The last time I took a look at the number of employers that are using the site, I think it's just about over 10,000 now. And that's probably mainly in Ontario that the site is being used. There's also a number of service provider partners, well over 100 service providers across Ontario that are part of this network. In addition, I believe there's over 20 or 25 post-secondary institutions that are also feeding talent into the system through the Magnet platform. So the platform is building out quite nicely over the last year or so, and probably in the next year we'll see that grow in greater leaps and bounds in terms of the number of users from a talent perspective and also from a company perspective. I believe there's probably over 75,000 now profiles.
Yeah, it's available. It's just over 80,000.
Is it 80,000? Thanks for correcting me. I'm a bit behind on my stats. So over 80,000 profiles already in the system that companies can use to source some of their talent needs.
Yeah. And one of the great features about Magnet, again, from the service organizations is the service organizations, again, are the first to meet newcomers as they come into the country and immediately are setting them up with profiles on the Magnet technology. So again, to allow that access, as an employer, you can select an equity measure. So if you're looking, again, at newcomer talent, if you're looking at those, accessibility measures, if you're looking at, hiring, more women, you can self-select what it is that you're looking for, and it will make those seamless matches for you. So rather than sifting through 500 applications, it will make, very well-suited matches based on the criteria that you self-select.
Yeah, here's a question that speaks to, do you think that the recruitment process surveys for candidates is helpful, to analyze potential biases in your recruitment strategy? I think anytime someone takes a look, and Devin, you can jump in as well, really what you need to do is you take a look at the process that you're using, because typically what happens is when we develop processes, unintended consequences always pop up. So we have to take a look at this. We have to step back, look at our process, see if there's an unintended barrier that you've accidentally put into that hiring process, that you might be inadvertently screening out people that you might want to hire into your workplace. The other thing I will say about the Magnet process, if you get a chance to use it, what it does do and what we're seeing in the early stages of the use of this tool is this. It actually kind of helps eliminate some of that early stage hiring bias, because, as Devin said earlier, what happens is you post your job in the system, then the matches are made, but when you see the matches and you see the skill sets of the individuals that are matched to your particular job, the information about the individual is redacted, so you don't get to see that. So all as you're really seeing is their qualifications and their skill sets and how they match to your particular job that you're trying to hire for. Once you make that decision to actually interview that individual and make a connection. Only at that point will you get to see the additional information about that individual. So what we are seeing is some of that early stage hiring bias being limited. Do you want to add to that in any way, Devin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most incredible things about this technology is that it does anonymize all of the names, the locations of your education or experience, to again overcome that initial bias that you may have when you initially see an application, you see a name that you may not be able to pronounce, or you see credentials that you're not familiar with that institution. And so the anonymizing of those allows for that early stage bias to be overcome and for you to recognize the qualifications that that individual can bring to your workplace. To go back to the previous or first piece of that question, I think going through the recruitment section of the employer roadmap is, again, an important first step. Sometimes we come into a position and there's tried and true processes in place, and everyone has been using them, and it's easy, and you've had success. And sometimes it's taking a hard look at some of those standard processes and making sure that they're shifting in the same way that the demographics are shifting. And so the section really asks you to answer really tough questions and to explore some perspectives from a newcomer that you may not be thinking of.
Here's a question here that speaks to Devin. Is how is Magnet different from other job portals?
I think the key difference is, again, is using language both from an employer perspective and from a job seeker perspective that's the same. So oftentimes, on Indeed or Monster, as an employer, you post a job posting and you get 500 applications that now, as an HR professional, you have to sift through them. You have to find if people have, you may have said attention to detail. They may have said, can work closely and read carefully, and using different language to really explain the same thing. But you may overlook it because you're really looking for that attention to detail as an early screening process. Magnet does all that for you. So you provide a job posting, and you're only allowed to choose language from a drop-down menu. And it's so exhaustive. I've never gone on there and not been able to find what I want to describe or the qualifications, but it really is emphasizing qualifications, competencies, and giving you lots of opportunities to use different phrases to explain what it is that you're trying to get at in terms of qualifications and credentials. The way it's different is that job seekers are given that same language. So when they're describing themselves, their qualifications, their experiences, they're given the same drop-down menu that the employer uses, which makes that matching seamless. So instead of getting 500 applications that you now have to sift through, and again, you're subject to being tired, having biases, wanting to go quickly through resumes, instead you're given a pool of 25 that match exactly and explicitly to the language that you've done. Again, it's anonymized, so you are eliminating that opportunity to go for candidates that have names that you recognize, that have qualifications that you recognize, and instead you're looking at explicitly their competencies and credentials that match the skills and credentials you're looking for. So I think that's what makes it very unique. It's very technology driven, and again, it's meant to, for an HR professional, it's meant to make your job a little easier in making those initial matches for you based on what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation in terms of the differences between a job board and what the Magnet platform actually does. It's much more interactive, and it's much more focused, I guess, on trying to develop or ascertain for the company the person with the actual skill sets that they need to match their opportunity at their company. Here's a question here that speaks about, because obviously when you're thinking of hiring a foreign trained professional, what usually comes to mind, and the question here speaks to this, is so is there an organization out there, or are there organizations out there that help evaluate credentials of a newcomer in terms of equivalency?
There's several different organizations, and again, throughout the roadmap, we provide direct links to those resources, so you can go right to that section. The one that we've worked closely with is the World Education Services. Excellent organization. so responsive, so helpful in terms of overcoming those initial concerns or questions that you may have when it comes to assessing foreign credentials, because we recognize that that is does make it a little bit more challenging. And I think what WES, World Education Services, would say is that it should be seen as an opportunity. So while it appears as an initial challenge, it really is an opportunity to provide your business with a new perspective, with someone who's going to have an interesting way of looking at different problems. And again, that's where that innovation piece comes in. So I would strongly encourage when it comes to evaluating foreign credentials, while it may appear to be an extra step, in terms of engaging WES and helping to assess those, it should be seen in the long run as a benefit to your business.
So Salma, you talked quite a bit about Magnet today. Are those services free for employers?
So they are. So Magnet allows you to make a job post, to have access to what they call in-system messaging. So what we will do, hire immigrants or immigrant serving organizations. If you build a profile, you'll get, it's kind of like on Facebook when you get a news feed of, important events or things that come up that may be of interest to you based on what you've specified that you're looking for. So that's an interesting feature. It also allows for online learning tools. And so there's a section on the employer page that allows you to engage with different learning tools. Again, it will direct you back to Hire Immigrants as well, to some of the resources that are upcoming. So it really is a one-stop shop for posting as well as gaining helpful resources. Now, when you make a match, so it will make those matches for you, again, anonymizing them. If you select that, you've got 10 matches, after reviewing them, 3 of them you want to bring forward, you want to see their full application, including their name and location. If it's a student, it's completely free. So if it's a post-secondary student, it's completely free. If it's not a post-secondary student and it's a newcomer or it's another applicant, it is $9, so $10 to see that application fully. Again, the sentiment is that they've done all the heavy lifting in terms of you haven't had to look through 500 applications. Instead, you're getting 3 candidates that meet the qualifications that you're looking for. And so that's the fee associated with a non-student applicant.
So let me understand this a little deeper if I can. So if I'm a company and I post a job, is there a fee to actually post that job?
Not at all.
So there's no fee to post. No. So the fee only comes in when I'm making a connection. So I get to see the redacted resume, I get to see how many resumes are in the system that meet the skill sets that I'm looking for. It's just when I actually want to connect with someone to get their contact information that the fee kicks in, if I'm not sourcing someone from one of our colleges and universities, if I'm not sourcing a student. So if they're sourcing an older person like me, is that what you're saying? That's when that $10 fee comes in per connection.
If it's not somebody who identifies as a post-secondary student, so they could be a recent grad, they could be a newcomer, they could be an experienced professional like Louis who's looking for a career change, then yes, that's when the fee kicks in.
Okay, here's a question here that speaks to, are there organizations out there that are helping prepare newcomers for the employment market in Ontario?
Absolutely. So some of the immigrant serving organizations that I referenced to before, so TRIAC and Access Employment, are 2 organizations that we work very closely with. And so the way we distinguish ourselves, Hire Immigrants, is TRIAC and Access, they work with the immigrants. They prepare them for, how do you prepare your resume, your cover letter, how do you prepare for a resume, for an interview. They have a fabulous mentorship program with working professionals to help them learn some of those nuances that help them use some of those nuances about the workforce in Canada. And so how do you communicate with a supervisor? How do you, what's the difference between email and IMing and all these different nuances of the Canadian workforce? So that's really the TRIACs and the Access and COSTI. They work with the immigrant populations. Now, they don't get every single one of them. Not every newcomer that comes to Canada is kind of forced to go to those service centers, but a lot of them. They are really champions and leaders in this space. Now, Hire Immigrants is the other side of that coin. So we really work with employers and HR professionals to prepare them to embrace that diversity. So how do you make sure, again, exploring the roadmap, how do you make sure that you are reaching that full potential, that full population of talent? And how are you making sure that you can manage and retain them? And so we work with all kinds of industry partners. And so we work very closely with the immigrant serving organizations like TRIAC and Access, and they often refer employers who are looking to solve some of the more kind of management or retaining aspects of it.
You mentioned earlier, Devin, about Magnet having the capacity to help companies that are looking to hire from designated groups. Could you just go over that again for us, please?
Yeah, so as a job seeker, if I'm creating a profile, I can self-identify as a person with a disability, as a woman, as someone who identifies as an Aboriginal, newcomer, visible minority. So there are lots of different equity and designation groups that I can self-select as a job seeker. As an employer, you can also self-select that you're specifically looking for or prioritizing candidates that come from these specific designation or equity groups. So again, allowing for that seamless match to happen. So it won't exclude other candidates that don't meet those equity groups, but it will provide you with a prioritized list.
Okay, now in terms, here's a question here that maybe you could speak to. It says here, how am I able to align a new immigrant hire with the organization's objectives? Like, is that any different really from hiring any new individual into your community? Are there other things that I need into your organization in terms of getting, that new hire aligned to really, the vision and the objectives and the culture of the organization?
Yeah, I think there are nuances for a newcomer hire. I think an example or anecdote that comes to mind is a executive that came from France, and he gave a keynote address. And when he came to Canada and he was working, he got some really negative feedback from upper management that he wasn't very personable, he didn't speak, very positively around his employees. He was very direct, very frank, and that's not really how the organization conducted itself with its employees. And what he tied that to was that in Canada, we teach from a very young age, from kindergarten, presentation skills. So we have kids do show and tell. We have kids get in front of their classrooms and give presentations about their, summer vacation. In France, they don't do that. In France, it's very independent work. It's not really emphasizing those presentation skills. And the inability for the organization to speak to that in his orientation meant that he got negative feedback later down the line. So it's very important to appreciate that there are nuances to the Canadian labor market. There are different ways in the ways we communicate, and it's different for every organization. In my organization, I can easily walk into my executive director's office and ask for a 5-minute conversation. In other organizations, that's not appropriate. And so it's really important to remember that, being new to a work environment in and of itself is daunting, and there's lots of different things you need to learn being a new staff. Being new to an environment that's also new in terms of the culture and country and the people that you're working with is incredibly challenging. And so being sensitive to that and incorporating some of the onboarding checklists that we include in the employer roadmap is really important to make sure that people don't feel 2 weeks into the job that they've been told, no, you're not allowed to do that. No, I shouldn't do that. Oh, that was really inappropriate. You shouldn't have done that. Because now you're not creating an environment where they feel like they've been set up for success. So it's really important right from the outset to have those kind of conversations and bring those things out in the open.
Here's one more time we're being asked, I've been on the Hire Immigrants site and I don't see where I can actually register for the upcoming webinar. Can you help the folks with that question?
Yeah, so I don't have access to my computer right this second. The invite is going out as soon as I get back into the office, and so I can assure you by 2 p.m. today you will see it on our homepage. And again, I can make that link available to Nancy, and she can pass it on to all the registrants of this event. So I assure you, I'm not fibbing, it will be up there.
Okay, does Hire Immigrants actually help with labor impact assessment process at all?
We don't assist with LMIs. We certainly have resources available under our resource tab that will direct you to services that can help with that. But we, as an organization, that we just don't have the capacity to help with overcoming some of the challenges with LMIs processing.
Sometimes when folks are hiring, they're looking for certain types of experience. And I see a question here that equates to, how does an employer take a look at Canadian experience versus experience elsewhere? Because that could be a potential, one of those barriers that pops up that isn't intended.
Right.
How do I, as an employer, kind of deal with this?
So I think, again, the anonymizing the resumes, again, I'll go back to Magnet, why that's so important, because it really eliminates that initial bias that you can have. But again, going back to the employer roadmap, it really asks you to look at, when you're designing a job description, are there specific credentials that you really do need to have for this job, or is it more important to have a skill set that's been developed through experience? If it's the latter, it goes through what we call credibility checklists. So again, trying to eliminate looking at where they got the experience, and instead looking at what is the experiences that they've gained and how can they be still beneficial to the Canadian workforce. Now again, there are nuances to this as well, because there are certain experiences when it comes to health and safety. Canadian standards may be very different from a country abroad. So it's important to consider, what I call kind of deal breakers. What are things that, they really do need to have Canadian standards, and is there a way as an employer you can invest in them gaining those? So we have an excellent example from the construction trade union that have actually invested in training to allow people who have the experience from, again, looking at the Syrian refugee population, they have experience from Syria working in construction environments. They have the competencies in terms of doing the actual skills, but they don't have the health and safety requirements from a Canadian standard. So they offer those requirements right from within their own union.
So really, what I need to do as an employer, what you're saying is that I really need to look at experience and skill sets. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, that's really what I'm hiring for. I'm hiring for someone that can come in and do the job that I'm looking for and help my company grow and prosper. So I really need to be careful that I don't put up an unintended barrier simply because of the language that I'm using in my job ad.
Yeah.
Really, really important.
And just before we move on to another question, one thing I'll add to that is oftentimes we think having more diverse people at the table is going to lead to conflict. It's going to lead to conflict, and it's going to make, job and work harder. And a Harvard Business Review study found that that was one of the reasons employers didn't want to hire newcomers, was they felt like, I've got a great team, everyone, we get along well, we all, think the same, and I don't want to, hire someone that's going to kind of create conflict. And what they found was that conflict has positive outcomes when it comes to economic growth, when it comes to innovation, because when you get different perspectives at the table, while there may be a little bit of conflict and harder work to come to a resolution, you come to a resolution that's much more innovative, that's much more different, because you've looked at it from different perspectives. And so it's really about overcoming that necessity to have people who look like you, sound like you, think like you, because those are not businesses that are going to continue to thrive and be competitive if they're not adopting those different perspectives and learning how to really leverage that diverse talent to be innovative, to find different ways to solve questions and challenges that a lot of employers are working to overcome.
You touched on a little bit earlier, Devin, on some of the agencies out there that can help businesses better, access this talent pool. In addition to those supports, are there any incentives for hiring a newcomer, into my company?
So off the top of my head, I can't think of any incentives in terms of, a dollar amount that, the government or that another organization is putting to hiring immigrants. I would go back to the business case and say that this isn't a you should do it. This is a must do. The reality is that the immigrant population is our labor force of the future. And so an inability to adapt and change with this demographic shift is going to mean that other businesses are going to surpass you in terms of being competitive. So off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I will take that back to the team and consider looking into that a little bit more, because I think it's a great question. But again, I would go back to the business case and say hiring skilled immigrants is no longer a should do, but it's a must do to remain viable in this economy.
Yeah, what you're saying there, speaks true with most companies. Most companies that I see as I travel around Ontario. I was in Kingston having a discussion with a number of companies several weeks ago, and this issue came up. I can't find the talent. I'm looking for some folks. I'm looking for newcomers, and it's interesting. It goes right from entry-level positions to senior management positions that companies are looking for. So in terms of what you're seeing through the roadmap, if I'm a company, I can use that roadmap to take a look at sourcing talent from all levels in my organization, I would expect. Is that true?
Absolutely. So this isn't just for new hires in the sense that they're coming in at the entry level. This is new hires coming in at any level. But again, the welcoming nature, the inclusive environment, it has to be throughout. It can't just be department specific. It really has to come from senior management and trickle down throughout all of the departments so that you don't have that turnover. If you really, and we have seen this time and again through employer success stories, that early investment, that investment of time in the first 6 months of a new hire leads to loyal employees who want to stay and grow in the company. And so I encourage, when you're looking at those recruitment measures, you're also looking at onboarding and retention, because oftentimes we focus so much on recruitment, we get them in the door and kind of wash our hands, we've done our job, and then that person leaves the company in 6 months or 8 months. And so again, making that early investment and making them feel included and welcomed, making sure that you're looking at your training, making sure that you're looking at the other, current staff. Have you done any cross-cultural training? Have you made sure that not just your new hire, but your current staff are aware of sensitivities that maybe weren't around 20 years ago when they first started in that company? So it's really important to make sure throughout the onboarding process, from recruitment right through to promotion, that you're keeping in mind those cultural differences.
So you talked about, because there's a question here that I see popping up, that says, sometimes that, when folks are hired into a company, the peer group may be a bit, they're saying here is insecure, is the question that's coming up about the new employee skills and qualifications. And I know you talked a little bit throughout the presentation about, cross-cultural training. Can you just maybe speak a little bit more to that? Because I think that relates to any employee that comes into a new organization, that sometimes folks are a little insecure about the skill sets of that new individual. But maybe we can relate it a little bit to a newcomer.
Yeah, so I'll give 2 examples when it comes to cross-cultural competency training. And there are 2 great resources on the roadmap itself and within the Hire Immigrants platforms. And again, it's providing training not just to your new hire, but to your current staff as well. One is 3M Solutions out of London, Ontario. Does this fabulous training program when they have a pool of new hires. Every quarter they do an exercise which is just a communication skills, and they have their upper leaders speak to another leader through a communication exercise. And again, there's more details on the web, but again, it shows that commitment from leadership to be encompassing of all of their staff, regardless of where they've come from, regardless if they have an accent, if they don't, and again, allows for the staff to see that leadership, and when you see that leadership, it translates itself into practice among working level staff as well. The second would be a mentoring program. We often find, again, there's examples from RBC, examples from the construction union. When you have one of your, working level staff, maybe they've been with a company for a year or 2 years, regardless if they're a newcomer or not, putting them in that leadership role, saying, we have a new hire that's coming in. I want them to shadow you for their first 2 days. I want you to take them around and introduce them. Let them take on that leadership roles to, again, allow for your new hire to already have kind of a friend in the workplace, but also for that peer to talk with them, to meet with them, to hear about what their experiences are, why were they onboarded. Once that appreciation and that contact is made, we find that it lends itself to, again, creating that more inclusive environment.
Well, at this point, I'm just going to close the Q&A. Devin, I thank you very, very much for the great information that you provided today, and all the folks on the webinar for the great questions that you asked. I'd just like to turn it over to Nancy now to close.
Yes, thank you so much, Louis. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
What a lot of information you've given us to think about. Thank you for everyone that is joining us today. There are a couple of questions that have consistently come out with respect to the webinar that is upcoming. I will get the link from Devin, and we will send that out to all of you. With respect to CPD code, there are a lot of questions around that. We will be sending out a survey at the end of today or tomorrow. That survey will contain the CPD code, and the CPD code will be provided in the last question of that survey. So as soon as you get that survey, if you go to the last question, you'll have the CPD code. And again, thank you for joining us. If you have any PD questions, don't hesitate to email HRPA at professionaldevelopment@hrpa.ca. Thanks everyone for joining us.